There have been a lot of supposed leaks and things like that have popped up recently, and I've received loads of requests to talk about them. The leaks themselves are actually probably the least interesting thing about all of this, though. The true puzzle is the timeline of the next year of World of Warcraft and just what the hell might be going on. Now, with patch 6.2 coming out in late June, and it being the final raid tier of this expansion, we find ourselves in a strange situation. If we are to have the next expansion be announced at BlizzCon, then Blizzard will be at odds with themselves. They did say their goal was to reduce the time between the final patch of a current expansion and the release of a following expansion. So if everything was to play out as it normally does, well, then that goal would fail. A year of patch 6.2 would be a catastrophe for the game, and even though 5.4 did last for 14 months, well, 5.4 came with a new form of content in Timeless Isle, and it was also supported by a larger and more fleshed out expansion that had more stuff in it. Now, the other contender for an expansion announcement, and probably the one that ties into all of these supposed leaks, is Gamescom, which takes place at the start of August. Blizzard announcing at Gamescom would normally seem really far-fetched to me, but if there was ever a year for it to happen, it is this one. First, it would be more consistent with Blizzard's aim to cut down the length of the final patch. Second, it would seem that they have been trying to get Warlords of Draenor out of the way as quickly as they can. Farallon was, amongst many other things, cut, and they have accelerated the storyline to pretty much a state of completion without the slightest thought given to character development or anything like that. It's as if they're just rushing through WoD and getting it done with. When we look at the body of post-release content that came with this expansion, it's also clear that most of their man-hours are not going towards the content of this expansion. With the objectively horrific performance of the expansion as well, it's reasonable to assume they just want to get things over with, and their actions might suggest that case. Their Q2 earnings call is also a few days before Gamescom, but I don't really think that means much. Generally, expansions are released a year or so after their announcement. For an example, Wrath was a year and 3 months, Cataclysm was a year and 4 months, and Mists was a mere 11 months. Warlords was also 12 months after its announcement. The Warlords wait felt a bit longer though because it was announced months after the final patch of MoP. If this is to be the final patch and they follow their usual 12 to 16 month pattern, then we're in for a bad time, and that would just be very odd. So assuming they have been putting their resources away from WoD and into the next expansion, as I believe they have, we should probably be in for a shorter time until the next expansion comes out from its announcement date. If that was to be, say, 8 months, then a Gamescom announcement would place the next expansion at Q1 2016. That is still too much 6.2 for my comfort, but hey, it is less than 14 months of the damn thing. If the announcement was at BlizzCon, then it would place the next expansion at summer 2016, in line with the movie. This would mean a full year of patch 6.2 though, and that's not really in line with their overall goal that they've been talking about, and have really been driving home recently. So assuming they have been working in secret to cut down that amount of time, Gamescom seems more likely than ever. Usually leaks start to pop up a few weeks before an announcement. What we do know though is that Warlords of Draenor was quite accurately leaked, and at the time the concept was so outlandish that most people wrote it off as being bullshit. Still, keep in mind that the idea of Warlords was accurately leaked, so who knows what's possible, and maybe that's happened this time around, but hey, probably not. Now, the most popular leak that's doing the rounds is the Dark Prophet. It merges some popular ideas together, and it sounds plausible enough to me. Now, the Dark Prophet actually sounds very similar to another leak called the Eye of Ashara, and both of these take place and are surrounding the South Seas concept that players have been expecting for quite a while. The Dark Prophet came from 4chan's V-board from a user called Geheimnis, basically it's German for secret. It's the same username as the person behind the main Warlords of Draenor leak, but it's very easy to fake a name, so that probably doesn't mean much. To go over what's proposed, Basically, the Zandalari prophet Zul he's just up to his tits with Rastakhan being a lazy bastard, so he had him killed, and then Zul takes control of the full Zandalari Empire. He allies them with Ashara and the Naga, and lore-wise, there is a big focus on trolls and night elves, which I think would be a great departure from orcs. Vol'jin is apparently to have some sort of story about staying with the Horde and steering clear of the other trolls, and on the Alliance side, Malfurion is to play a decently large role, being the main hero, something that I think makes sense considering it's Ashara, the Naga, and therefore the Old Gods, and when you think back to what he was, say, doing in Darkshore with the Cataclysm questing. Now, the new class is to be the Shadowstalker, which is a ranged weapon magic class. So it's really just another ranged weapon class, which makes sense. We don't actually have another ranged weapon class other than the Hunter. The specs are Dark Ranger, Spirit Mender, and Shadow Hunter, and apparently this expansion would come with a level 100 Shadow Hunter, which I think is a thoroughly dumb idea. There would be 8 new zones: the Valarian Depths, Zandalar, Kulturas, Kazan, Telebeam, Banana Swag, Plunder Isle, the Rift, and the Broken Isles. The leak mentions 2 starter zones, which is something that I really liked in Wrath of the Lich King. Kazan is the Horde hub, and Kulturas is the Alliance hub. In those places, players get ships, which they can sail around the various different islands, oddly enough, apparently including the waters surrounding the isles, basically like the full open ocean, which seems like a pretty cool idea. It suggests that you can recruit pirates into your crew, which sort of worries me. The suggested functionality of the pirates did seem pretty minor though. It was things like unique quests, maybe a unique fishing recipe, a barber. It seemed like pointless crap, but who really knows. To go over the zones, the Valarian Depths is supposed to be a smaller Vashir that follows the Neptulon plotline, which was dropped by Cataclysm. Zandalar is apparently all about working out what the hell's going on with the Troll Empire post-Cataclysm and what they're up to. Telebeam is a tropical island with some neutral trolls who you aid. The Rift is one of the endgame zones, and it's the location of Nazjatar, which is the Naga home city, and the Broken Isles is apparently the other endgame zone, and it's full of trolls and Naga who are snooping around the Tomb of Sagaris, probably getting up to all sorts of hijinks. There is also supposed to be multiple dungeons per zone, I presume in some sort of winged format. So that's pretty much it for the contents of the leak. Bearing in mind that the last few minutes that you heard was likely, it could all be bullshit, what do you think? Well, personally, I think it actually sounds pretty good on paper. Trolls and Naga are a big change from the enemies that we have been fighting over the last few years, and by the time this comes out, it will have been quite a while since we've had a troll patch. A more tropical setting is also quite a nice departure, which I think would be a very good variation, and I think they would be able to make the zones feel very different since it is a bunch of completely separate islands, which could be kind of nice. If they pull off the idea of us sailing ships and they make that really feel good, then it could work out very well, but I definitely hope they steer clear of anything that is really Garrison-ish. Seriously, that shit has no place in a desktop game. Oddly, N'Zoth is not mentioned, despite him being the dude who planned the Cataclysm and turned the Highborn into the Naga, but I would assume he would have some sort of role to play in an expansion like this. A new class would be nice enough, but I think it's more important to fix up the current classes, as many of them feel really bland without the aid of a 2 or 4 piece set bonus or maybe a cool trinket. That said, I think the Shadowstalker could be pulled off pretty decently. More dungeons would also be great, especially if they balance things so the dungeons mean a bit more in the endgame. Having 8 zones is also really good. Warlords of Draenor only launched with 6, and 8 content-rich zones was what Wrath of the Lich King had, and I think it struck an excellent balance. Multiple starting zones is also great, especially if they open them up to both factions. Having 2 high-level zones would also be fantastic. Again, it's something that worked out very well in Wrath of the Lich King. And oddly enough, having the Grand being the max level zone and not really feeling like one, I think was a bit weird and disjointed in Warlords of Draenor. I'd like for the pace of the leveling as well to be a bit longer than Warlords and maybe a bit more spread out in terms of pacing, with a little bit more time to build up characters and actually do plot, rather than just sort of killing a character, having a punchy thing happen, and it really being very instant gratification and very quick. I think a merger of the Wrath and Warlords quest flows would be overall a very good balance to strike. I think there's also plenty of potential for patch content too. You've got things like the Tomb of Sagaris, you've got old gods floating around, so they could definitely do some pretty cool stuff. But still, it could all be bullshit. I just thought it would be sort of fun to talk a little bit about the various leaks. It does seem like something that is South Seas-ish, you know, so maybe the Dark Prophet, maybe Eye of Ashara, something along those lines would seem kind of probable. Other ideas that I've seen are kind of based in more time travel stuff and don't really make a great deal of sense. Oh, and because N'Zoth could be involved in something South Seas-ish, that might be a way to get an Emerald Dream patch in somewhere, which I know is something a lot of people have wanted to see. So there you go, that's basically it for this video. I thought I would just talk a little bit about release dates, what they mean, and sort of cover the leaks, mainly because it's fun to indulge in, but again, I don't really think that at this early stage we can garner a ginormous amount of information from stuff. If I start to see more credible leaks, then maybe I'll dive into more detail about them, but for now I think that's about it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you next time.